Okay, so let's go over again the Mishnayos we did yesterday. Yesterday we started with Parak Aleph Mishnah Daled, talking about the brachos of Kriya Shema. So Mishnah Daled says, "B'shachar mevarach shnayim lefaneha." In the morning, we say two brachos before Kriya Shema, v'achas lachara, and one after. Ube'erev, and in the evening, shnayim lefaneha v'shnayim lachara. There are two brachos both before and after Kriya Shema. Achas arucha v'achas kesara. The simplest way to read it is that those two brachos before, one is a longer bracha that starts with a baruch and ends with a baruch, and one is a shorter. Makom sham laharach, a place where they said to make a bracha longer to begin with the baruch. In B'shal Kat, so you can't shorten it and not have that baruch Hashem at the beginning. Lakats are a place where they said to make a bracha shorter and not to say baruch Hashem at the beginning. In B'shal Laharach, you would not be allowed to add a Baruch Hashem at the beginning. Lachtoim, a place where they said to say another Baruch Hashem at the end of the bracha. In Rishai Shaloi Lachtim, you can't leave it out. Shaloi Lachtim, any bracha they said just to start with the Baruch Hashem and not have one at the end. In Rishai Lachtim, you can't add it. You can't add your own at the end. So you have to follow the format that the Rabbanan set up for all the brachas. Okay, Mishnah Hey. Mazkirin Yetzias Mitzrayim B'leilos. We mention Yetzias Mitzrayim at night. This is Amr Belazar, and then discussing that statement, Amr Belazar ben Azariah said, "Harayani kiven shivim shana." I'm like 70 years old. So he said yesterday, man, he wasn't 70. He just looked old because a miracle happened for him when they appointed him. He began looking old, so they would respect him. But I was not able to convince people of this halacha. The Mishnah just said that we should mention Yetzias Mitzrayim at night. Ad Shadarsha ben Zoma, until Ben Zoma came along and he made the following drasha. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "L'man tizkar es yom tzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim," in order that you should remember the day you left the land of Egypt, kol yemei chayecha, all the days of your life. So he made a drasha of yemei chayecha. If it just said the days of your life, hayamim, that would obligate you to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim every day. Kol yemei chayecha, the additional all, is halelis, that's coming to include nights. The Chum who disagreed argued Yemei Chayecha is Ha'ilam Hazeh is nowadays. Kol Yemei Chayecha l'havi Yemei Mashiach, even after the time that Mashiach comes, we'll still mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. But with this drasha ben Zaymer, Belazar ben Azariah was able to convince the people that it seems more likely that to darshan Kol Yemei Chayecha to include nights than to include a future time, and then it became general practice to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim day and night. Okay, let's begin Parak Beis. Hayakayru b'Torah. If a person was reading Torah, v'higia zman mikra, and it came the time to read Kriya Shema, imkivin libay, if he has intent, yatsa, then he will fulfill his obligation of Kriya Shema. V'imlav lo yatsa, and if not, he won't be yatzeh. So the Gemara points out that the simple reading of this Mishnah implies that mitzvos richos Kavana, that someone has to have intent to fulfill a mitzvah. So if I'm just reading Parsha from Chumash and I don't realize that it's Kriya Shema, I would not be yotzei. The Gemara says, well, there is an opinion that disagrees and says mitzvahs don't need Kavana. So in order to get out of that, the way they would read this Mishnah is if he was reading the Torah to make sure it was written properly, to make sure all the words were spelled correctly, but he wasn't bothering to pronounce them properly. So then he wouldn't be yotzei unless he'd kiven libo to actually read the way you're supposed to read.
It has to be a twofer. You have to have the reading for the Shema, but also for the sake of saying
right.
Shema.
But prakim, in between the paragraphs, shayil mipnei hakavod, someone can ask how someone else is doing of someone that they're obligated to honor, a father, a rebbe. Umeshiv.
Shalom Aleichem Rebbe.
Yeah, and Umeshiv, and they can respond if the Rebbe asks them how they're doing, and they're in between the paragraphs of Kriya Shema, they can respond. They could say, "I'm well." Ube'emtza, in the middle of a paragraph, Shel Ne'ayira, you can ask someone who you're afraid of that they might kill you if you don't give them proper respect, like a king. Umeshiv, and again you could respond to such a person in the middle of a paragraph. Different Meir. That's Rabbi Meir Shita. Rabbi Yehuda says, not so fast. Be'emtza, more, he's even more makel. And if you're in the middle of a paragraph, then he agrees you could be shayel b'nei yira, someone you're afraid of. You can ask how they're doing. Umeisha b'nei kavod, but responding to someone has a lower bar. If his rebbe or father asked him how he's doing, someone he's obligated to honor, he could respond to them in the middle of a parak. But prakim, in between the prakim, again his lower bar, shayel b'nei kavod, that he agrees to Meir, you can ask someone you're obligated to honor how they're doing. Umeishiv shalom l'chol adam, and you could respond to any random person who happened to greet you in the middle of when you're between the paragraphs of Kriya Shema, you could respond to them. And then the Mishnah Beis delineates ve'eluhein bein prakim, which places in Kriya Shema are considered between paragraphs. So they're pretty intuitive. Bein bracha rishon l'shniya, between the first and second bracha is the first break. Bein shniya l'shema, between the second bracha and the parsha of Shema is the second break. Bein Shema l'vahayim Shemaya, between the first paragraph of Shema and the second paragraph of Shema. Bein vahayim Shemaya l'vayomer, between the second paragraph of Shema and the third paragraph of Shema. And then Bein Vayomer le'emes v'yatziv, between the third paragraph, the final paragraph of Shema, and emes v'yatziv, the bracha afterwards. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Bein emes v'yatziv lo yifsek, a person should not to make a break between Vayomer and emes v'yatziv, because we want to say Hashem l'keichem emes, which is a pasuk, but since Kriya Shema ends with Ani Hashem l'keichem, and emes v'yatziv starts with emes, we want to put them together to get that statement of Hashem l'keichem emes, which is a statement of Kabbalah Shemayim, which fits with the ideal of Kriya Shema, so he says not to make a break over there. And B'Shuman Karcha just explains now the order of the three paragraphs of Shema. Lama kadma Shema l'vahayim Shemaya. Why is Shema first and then Vehaya Shemaya? So they point out that this question really isn't an independent question, because Shema comes before Vehaya Shemaya. So obviously, why wouldn't it be first? Really, the question's based on the fact that Vayomer is even earlier. Vayomer is in Bamidbar. Shema and Vehaya Shemaya are both in Dvarim. So since you see we're not putting Vayomer first, you can't say that Shema is first because it's first, because we don't go by that order. So rather, why is it first? Elokeshi tekabel of Ol Malchus Shemayim. Shema is first because first you should say, you should accept Hashem's kingship, Tchila first. V'yachkach yikabel of Ol Mitzvos, and then you're going to go to Vehaya, which talks about doing the mitzvahs, that first you accept Hashem's general kingship, then specifically to fulfill His commandments. V'hayim Shemaya l'Vayomer. So why is V'hayim Shemaya before Vayomer? Again, they explain because Vayomer has Ani Hashem l'keichem. Vayomer also has a statement of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim. So by your previous argument that Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim comes before Kabbalas Ol Mitzvos, Vayomer should go first. But notice we have a different answer over here. V'hayim Shemaya noeg b'yemu v'layla. V'hayim Shemaya is primarily talking about the mitzvah of learning Torah, which is a mitzvah that applies day and night. Vayomer eino noeg ela b'yayim, and Vayomer is primarily talking about the mitzvah of tzitzis, and the mitzvah of tzitzis is only by day, and therefore V'hayim Shemaya is considered a broader parsha, and therefore it gets priority. Okay.
Shkach.